In 2024, South Korea's highly anticipated new disaster blockbuster, Project Silence, will finally be released. This film has changed the old method of relying solely on special effects, and instead adopts a brand new approach. It showed us a gaze from the depths of hell, leaving the audience feeling as if their throats were tightly gripped by the rhythm, unable to breathe. In addition, this film is the posthumous work of legendary actor Lee Sung-kyun. It truly allows the audience to feel the screen presence of an Oscar-winning actor. The male lead, Cha Jong-won, was originally the director of the National Security Office. This day, he had just finished a meeting with his close friend who was about to run for president, and then planned to send his daughter, Cha Kyeon-min, abroad for studies. But although young, Cha Kyeon-min had already entered her rebellious phase early. The slightest hint of discipline from Cha Jong-won only earned him Cha Kyeon-min's impatient retort. So, after the two finished packing, they began heading to the airport for departure. While passing a gas station, they also stopped to refuel. However, just as Chae Young-won was about to swipe his card to pay and leave, Joe Park, a staff member at the station, claimed that the card reader was broken and requested cash payment. Yet even after Cha Jong-won said he had no cash, Joe Park persistently insisted, clearly not wanting to process the card payment. He even offered an 8% discount for cash. But Cha Jong-won, as the National Security Office director, immediately sensed something wrong upon hearing this. He stuck his head out the window to look, and sure enough, Joe Park had a set of keys hanging from his waist.
주유소 직원이 딸기를 왜 가지고 있을까? 응?
Joe Park hadn't expected to encounter someone in the know who could recognize the master keys. He claimed he would go to the airport and pay Joe Parker upon his return, then rolled up the window and drove away from the gas station, leaving Joe Parker furious. At the same time, two sisters were also setting off for the airport. However, shortly after they drove out, as they reached the elevated highway, thick fog rose up ahead of them. Visibility dropped to almost zero. Yet, even in these extreme conditions, there were still reckless drivers willing to push on. Suddenly, a yellow Ferrari raced past them at high speed. It turned out to be a streamer broadcasting his elevated highway drift show live to the audience. Every time someone sent a gift, his speed increased by 10 miles per hour, and it had already reached 141 miles per hour. At the same time, Cha Jong-won was also driving on this very elevated highway. However, while driving, a military off-road vehicle suddenly appeared beside him and nearly overturned his car. This infuriated Cha Jong-won, who immediately honked his horn at the other driver. Just as Cha Jong-won was honking, his daughter Cha Kyeon-min noticed something strange about the other vehicle. She saw what looked like hunting dog-like creatures inside the vehicle's window, but after only 2 seconds of looking, the vehicle drove away. Meanwhile, the live streaming guy is slamming the pedal to the metal, living out his own fast furious. Unexpectedly, the heavy smog made the road nearly invisible, causing him to almost crash into a car ahead. When the car finally came to a stop, the host took a deep breath, but then, in the next second, another car slammed directly into his. A chain reaction followed, and many other vehicles couldn't avoid the collisions. Numerous cars started skidding and braking sharply. A massive accident scene unfolded across the entire bridge. Even more terrifyingly, a large tanker truck arrived at the scene. Due to the heavy inertia from sudden braking, it flipped over completely. This caused the vehicles involved in the accident to collide even more violently. When the two sisters arrived at the scene, they broke into a cold sweat seeing the hellish car crash resembling a human purgatory. They thought they had stopped safely, but in the next second, a car from behind rear-ended them. Meanwhile, a traffic officer on another lane was reporting the incident to his superiors. As he was speaking, the bucket of an excavator suddenly appeared in front of him, completely lifting off the roof of the police car. At the same time, Joe Park, who had been scamming at the gas station, was confronted by his boss. While being reprimanded, a radio broadcast sounded in Joe Park's vehicle. It reported a massive chain collision accident on the offshore elevated highway, with casualties being assessed. He promised to go immediately and get the money back for his boss. Joe Park guessed correctly, as Cha Jong-won was indeed on the opposite lane of the accident site. Ahead of Cha Jong-won were those military off-road vehicles. While driving, one of their vehicles had its tire tangled by a chain shaken loose from the accident scene, causing it to flip sideways. The lead vehicle at the front crashed directly into an overturned truck from the opposite lane. After the crash, the man inside didn't check his injuries first. Instead, he cautiously walked to the rear of the vehicle and carefully observed the condition of the cargo compartment. Meanwhile, Cha Jong-won, who had stopped his car, called his close friend Yoon Hyun-baek to explain their situation. However, while Cha Jong-won was speaking, his daughter Cha Kyan-min questioned why he wasn't helping the people in the flipped vehicle nearby. Seeing that Cha Jong-won ignored her, Cha Kyan-min decided to get out and help herself. Cha Jong-won, feeling helpless, went down to help in her place. Arriving at the overturned vehicle, he found military personnel had already rescued the man inside, but when Cha Jong-won asked questions, they completely ignored him, focused only on contacting their teammates ahead via walkie-talkie. Unfortunately, after calling repeatedly, there was no response. Seeing this, the man urgently told them to go check the situation. Before leaving, the man also asked Cha Jong-won to look after Dr. Yang on the ground. When the two men who had left reached the lead vehicle, they found that the rear door of the truck was wide open. Their driving teammate was found dead brutally inside the compartment. The man beside him realized the situation was dire and immediately ordered his teammate to activate the signal jammer. This was to prevent anyone from transmitting information outwards. Clearly, the creature that escaped its cage was not friendly, and it was also a military secret. Meanwhile, Cha Jong-won tried calling the traffic police but suddenly found no signal. Checking his phone, it showed no service. Sensing something wrong, Cha Jong-won looked towards the opposite lane. He saw everyone was frantically searching for a signal. This abnormal behavior instantly alarmed Cha Jong-won, and he wanted to tell his daughter Cha Kyan-min not to wander off. But Cha Jong-won didn't realize Cha Kyan-min was already watching a large black dog repeatedly bashing its head against the guardrail. Observing it closely, she noticed an experimental specimen-like number tag E09 on its body. Just then, Cha Jong-won spotted his daughter examining the dog and hurried over to pull her away. Fearing it might attack Cha Kyan-min, E09, with its intelligent eyes, saw Cha Jong-won protecting Cha Kyan-min and retreated. At the same time, near Dr. Yang, the two men who had finished checking the situation reported back. They informed him that all experimental subjects, the E-series dogs, had escaped. After speaking, they opened his computer right under Dr. Yang's shocked gaze. While Dr. Yang operated the computer, Cha Jong-won approached and demanded to know what the soldiers were doing and which unit they belonged to. One man instead asked Cha Jong-won who he was. Cha Jong-won didn't hide it, declaring himself an administrative officer from the Ministry of National Defense. He demanded to know why they were jamming phone signals. Hearing this, the man lost his earlier arrogance, only stating it was an emergency measure for the current critical situation. But Cha Jong-won wouldn't accept that and tried to grab the man's walkie-talkie to speak to his superior. Unexpectedly, this triggered the man, who instantly restrained Cha Jong-won against the vehicle. Restrained and unable to move, Cha Jong-won could only look at Dr. Yang, but Dr. Yang ignored him completely, focused solely on operating the computer. He told Cha Jong-won that staying with him was the safest option. Dr. Yang then looked at the screen. The project on it quickly completed its initialization. He simultaneously relayed the message via the walkie-talkie. The man who received the message on his end immediately began warming up. After securing his protective gear, he started issuing the voice sprint recognition command.
비상코드 04 프로젝트 사일런스 타겟 입력 시작합니다. 지침 하나 에코 제어를 목적으로 발령할 수 있으며 담당 실무자의 신속한 사고 제어를 목적으로 한다. 타겟 입력 완료.
시작한다. 셋, 둘, 하나.
As Dr. Yang's command was issued, all the experimental dogs began running towards the man's location. They relentlessly attacked the man in front of them. The man was clearly very experienced and skilled at handling these experimental dogs. However, overwhelmed by their sheer numbers, he had no choice but to dash into a vehicle, luring all the dogs inside. Once all the dogs were inside the vehicle compartment, Dr. Yang noticed one experimental dog standing completely still. This dog is E09, the mother of the entire experimental group. At this moment, Dr. Yang had no choice but to press the stop button. He needed to calm the frenzy of all the experimental dogs. Otherwise, the man acting as bait would surely be torn apart. As the experimental dogs calmed down, the military transport helicopter tasked with airlifting them arrived at the scene. It prepared to transport all the dogs along with their cages. One soldier approached the location where E09 had been standing. He found only E09's control chip left behind on the ground. This discovery horrified the man, who immediately tried to radio his teammates, but it was clearly too late. E09 was now standing atop the suspended vehicle compartment. As the helicopter took off, E09 leaped directly into the aircraft cabin. With a few swift maneuvers, It pounced on the soldiers inside, knocking them down. This inevitably caused the entire helicopter to lose balance. Its tail rotor slammed into the surrounding steel suspension cables. Seizing the moment during the crash, E-09 leaped out. Clearly, this height was nothing to E-09, the progenitor experimental subject. But the helicopter was in dire straits now. Its propeller kept relentlessly striking the steel cables. The intense noise directly caused all the dogs that had fallen to the ground to lose control. They all charged out of the vehicle compartments. Once outside, the dogs were no longer docile like before. They bit anyone they encountered along the way. For a bridge with such high population density, the experimental dogs were essentially enjoying an all-you-can-eat buffet. Soon, many civilians suffered heavy casualties, fleeing in panic. Meanwhile, the man who had acted as bait earlier couldn't escape either. E-09's eyes were filled with anger and destructive intent, fixed unwaveringly on the terrified man who was almost paralyzed with fear. At the same time, Joe Park had just arrived at the scene. He never expected to encounter such chaos and immediately abandoned his car to run. Cha Jong-won, who had just been freed from the handcuffs by Dr. Yang, was surprised to see Joe Park here. He grabbed his daughter, got into the car, and prepared to flee. Seeing this, Joe Parker hurriedly waved to Chae Young-won, hoping to give him a ride. However, Chae Young-won had no time to spare for him at that moment. Cha Kyan-min, however, deeply disapproved of her father's actions. She abruptly pulled the handbrake, causing Cha Jong-won to erupt in anger. Joe Parker saw the car stop and ran toward it as fast as he could. Luckily, just as the experimental dogs were catching up, he managed to jump into the trunk at the last possible moment. They hadn't driven far when sparks fell from the helicopter still tangled in the cables. These sparks instantly turned the damaged section of the road into a sea of flames. Seeing the inferno ahead, Cha Jong-won slammed on the brakes, crashing into a guardrail. He tried to start the car again but found it completely immobilized. Cha Jong-won then spotted Dr. Yang's walkie-talkie. He grabbed it, trying to contact someone on the other end. But before he could say more than a few words, an experimental dog landed on Cha Jong-won's car. It repeatedly slammed its metal muzzle against the windshield. At the same time, Cha Jong-won's friend Yoon Hyun-baek learned about the massive accident on the bridge. He's mulling over how to handle the reporters. By the time he faced the journalists, he had prepared his official statement. He announced that they would do their utmost to launch a rescue operation. Back with Cha Jong-won, seeing the walkie-talkie was ineffective, he urgently told Joe Park to wake Dr. Yang. As soon as Dr. Yang woke up, Cha Jong-won immediately demanded to know what was really happening. He explained that he had originally created these as rescue dogs to save lives. But after the military found out, they demanded he replace all the dogs with hunting dogs. These controlled dogs had chips implanted in their brains. They would relentlessly attack the targets specified by the voice command issuer. At the same time, Yoon Hyun-baek learned why these dogs were on the bridge. A man beside Yoon Hyun-baek explained that this batch of dogs were experimental rejects scheduled for disposal. They didn't expect that a car accident would cause all of the dogs to escape. After hearing Dr. Yang's explanation, Cha Jong-won continued trying to call for support. Unexpectedly, someone answered this time, and it was Yoon Hyun-baek himself. Hearing a response, Cha Jong-won let out a deep sigh of relief. He then asked Yoon Hyun-baek if he knew about Project Silence. Given the events unfolding on the bridge, the military behind the entire plan could not escape responsibility. They could use this as an opportunity for Yoon Hyun-baek's presidential campaign. However, to Chae Young-won's surprise, Yoon Hyun-baek said that the project had been approved by the president. Before Cha Jong-won could process this, a massive explosion rocked the bridge. Seeing this, Cha Jong-won quickly led his daughter and the others out of the car. They moved towards a bus on the opposite lane. He also urgently told Yoon Hyun-baek to send the military immediately to kill all the dogs. While he was speaking, the helicopter wreckage hanging from the bridge plummeted down. The bridge's steel support cables began snapping in a chain reaction. The entire bridge structure started collapsing from the middle. Fortunately, no one on the bus was injured. Among the passengers, Chae Zhengyuan stood up. First, he revealed his official identity. Then, he explained to the passengers with a simple excuse, saying that this was just a case of rabid dogs attacking humans. These dogs were supposed to be euthanized today, but the accident allowed them all to escape. However, he had already called for rescue. Everyone just needed to stay calm and wait quietly for the rescue to arrive. After Cha Jong-won finished speaking, the people on the bus finally breathed a sigh of relief. Soon, special forces tasked with eliminating the experimental dogs arrived on the scene, and at this point, test subject E-09 began to think in a surprisingly human way. Sensing danger, it immediately ran away. The special forces began escorting all survivors through the field of car wreckage ahead. Their goal was to get everyone to a safe safe zone. However, as they walked, a security alarm suddenly sounded from a car behind them. Hearing the alarm, everyone trembled with fear. 2 police officers stepped forward to investigate the situation, but upon checking, they found nothing unusual. Just as they started to relax, alarms suddenly blared from all the other cars nearby. The alarm sounds grew faster and more frantic. In the next second, one man was pounced on by an experimental dog that appeared out of nowhere. Immediately, more and more experimental dogs joined the attack. The soldiers, caught completely off guard, were all knocked down by the unnaturally fast dogs. Seeing this, the civilians panicked and ran wildly in terror. These professionally trained beasts unleashed among ordinary people were like wolves among sheep. They began an indiscriminate slaughter, akin to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Luckily, Cha Jong-won quietly escaped with his daughter underneath the bus they had been on earlier. This allowed them to narrowly avoid disaster. Once it seemed safer outside, Cha Jong-won knew he couldn't lose contact. He cautiously emerged from under the bus and picked up a walkie-talkie from the ground. Cha Jong-won also spotted a flare gun on the body of a dead soldier nearby and grabbed it too. But just as he was about to head back, he noticed movement inside a car in the distance and hurried over. Upon reaching this small makeshift shelter, URA confronted Cha Jong-won. She demanded to know why the rescue team had lied, promising safety only to send everyone out into the open like prey. Cha Jong-won immediately sensed something was wrong because URA's accusation made sense. By doing this, they had all been exposed like lambs in a wolf pack, waiting to be devoured. Meanwhile, Cha Kyan-min, who was playing on her phone, was startled by Dr. Yang appearing silently behind her. Dr. Yang ignored her completely and climbed inside the bus compartment. Once inside, he seemed resigned to his fate, staring intently at the pack of watchful experimental dogs. He had trained these dogs. He knew how lethal they were. He stated that the dogs weren't just attacking people now. This was an act of revenge. All the dogs were created using E09 as the progenitor mother. During the creation process, E09 had witnessed every one of her offspring being killed. Now, they were consumed by vengeance. Meanwhile, Cha Jong-won led the remaining survivors towards the bus. Just as they were about to reach the door, they discovered Cha Jong-won's daughter, Cha Kyan-min, had been restrained by Dr. Yang. He clearly didn't want her to open the door for Cha Jong-won and the others. The moment the door opened, the dogs would likely charge inside. The group outside, seeing Dr. Yang's action, could only react with furious shouts and curses. They still had to face the encircling pack of dogs. Fortunately, the group had torches in hand. Animals possess an instinctive fear of fire, so none dared approach Cha Jong-won and the others directly. They merely surrounded the group, continuously testing their defenses. Seeing the experimental dogs persistently probing, Cha Jong-won knew they couldn't delay any longer. He immediately pulled out the flare gun and fired it directly at Dr. Yang's head. In an instant, a blinding white light obscured everyone's vision. Seizing the chance while Dr. Yang was incapacitated, Cha Kyan-min quickly broke free from his grip. Once everyone was safely inside, Joe Park kicked Dr. Yang hard, sending him sprawling. He cursed continuously, calling Dr. Yang inhuman. After stabilizing themselves, they planned to drive the bus to one intact section to await the rescue arranged by Young Hyun-baek. Unexpectedly, they found no keys in the bus ignition. Cha Jong-won then remembered Joe Park had a set of master keys. Hearing this, Joe Park was momentarily stunned, then recalled it himself. He immediately went to the driver's seat to try them. Surprisingly, it worked. They began driving the bus towards the designated meeting point on the broken bridge, as mentioned by Young Hyun-baek. Seeing the injured people on board, Cha Jong-won tried to calm them first, and assured them that help was on the way. He then spoke into the walkie-talkie, announcing they had reached the rendezvous point. He urgently requested the snipers to open fire on the experimental dogs immediately. However, Cha Jong-won didn't anticipate the betrayal. Earlier, during his call with his close friend Young Hyun-baek, he had revealed that everyone at the scene now knew about Project Silence. Young Hyun-baek, to protect his own scheme, decided to silence them all. The project was not actually approved by the president, it was his own initiative, intended to provide leverage for his presidential campaign. He never expected this catastrophic leak today. In order to eliminate witnesses, he planned to have everyone bitten to death by dogs and buried. Therefore, no matter how desperately Cha Jong-won called over the radio, he received no reply from Young Hyun-baek. The people in the bus, sensing the situation, panicked. They realized they had been abandoned. Left with no other choice, they had to save themselves. They devised a trap. Everyone hid inside the bus's cargo hold. They rigged a line connected to the door's release mechanism. Since all the dogs were fixated on killing Dr. Yang, they would follow him anywhere. Sure enough, after only a short wait, a pack of experimental dogs entered the bus. Joe Park violently yanked the line at that moment. All the dogs were trapped inside. The group was surprised their plan worked so smoothly. After escaping, they clung to a final shred of hope and went to the broken bridge section, but there was no rescue team waiting there. Complete despair washed over them. Dr. Yang then asked Cha Kyan-min who her father had been communicating with. When Dr. Yang learned it was Yoon Hyun-baek, he seemed utterly broken. Trembling, he approached Cha Jong-won. He revealed that the entire project's silence was initiated by Yoon Hyun-baek. Furthermore, it was approved while Yoon Hyun-baek was serving on the defense committee. Hearing this, Cha Jong-won was visibly shaken. He grabbed the walkie-talkie and furiously confronted Yoon Hyun-baek. But no matter what Cha Jong-won said, Yoon Hyun-baek pretended not to hear, offering no reply. He had clearly decided to abandon Cha Jong-won. His motive was eliminating anyone obstructing his path to the presidency. Seeing Yoon Hyun-baek wouldn't respond, Cha Jong-won decided to act on his own plan. He resolved to head towards the other end of the bridgehead. They had planned to use Joe Park's tow truck to cross, but then realized the keys were still on the bus. With no other options available, this group of desperate people had no choice but to find another solution. First, they locked Cha Jong-won inside a vehicle. Then, Dr. Yang hid inside another car. He used his computer to control the chips in all the dogs' brains, commanding them to attack Cha Jong-won specifically. The reason they couldn't simply deactivate all the dogs was because the pack was now solely driven by aggression and completely uncontrollable. The only option was to direct their attack towards a specific target. Consequently, the dogs began frantically ramming the windows, desperate to get out and reach Cha Jong-won. Meanwhile, URA stood atop a car and started hitting golf balls. She aimed to shatter the glass using the impact of the golf balls. As ball after ball struck the window, the glass finally shattered. All the dogs surged out, charging towards the metal cage where Cha Jong-won was trapped. Seizing the opportunity, Joe Park snatched the car keys. But just as he got the keys, he realized E09 remained completely unaffected. Terrified, Joe Park started running for his life. E09 immediately attacked Dr. Yan once outside. However, at this critical moment, the bridge structure shifted again. The entire pack of dogs, along with Cha Jong-won's vehicle, began sliding down. Fortunately, at the last moment, Chae Young-won's car got stuck on the edge of the broken bridge. Seeing her father nearly perish, Cha Kyan-min couldn't hold back. She desperately grabbed the tow hook from the truck and managed to latch it onto the rear of Cha Jong-won's car. Miraculously, she succeeded just in time, preventing Cha Jong-won from falling. Joe Park, seeing this, stomped on the accelerator. He strained to pull Cha Jong-won and Dr. Yan up inch by inch. The final stretch became a race against death. The combined weight of the two vehicles put immense strain on the already damaged bridge. Cracks spread rapidly across the structure. Joe Park kept the pedal floored, knowing stopping meant death for everyone. Finally, they surged forward, reaching the safety of the other side. Numerous reporters and police officers were already cordoning off the area. When they reached the safe zone, Zhang Xianbai also appeared at the scene. Their direct eye contact made Yoon Hyun-baek visibly awkward. He started clapping, leading the applause, praising Cha Jong-won's actions, but as he approached, Cha Jong-won unexpectedly punched him squarely in the face. Simultaneously, Dr. Yang stepped forward. He addressed all the reporters, exposing both his own actions and Yoon Hyun-baek's crimes. Ultimately, Yoon Hyun-baek was engulfed by the ensuing media frenzy. After everyone was confirmed safe, E09 was discovered to have miraculously survived. It had also managed to save one of its offspring. Its gaze remained fixed intently on the broken bridge. This silent stare signified that from this day forward, it would undoubtedly embark on a path of vengeance.